Heavy has been an interesting case in the finals because the current meta for cash out relies very heavily on close range. We're definitely in a close range meta. A big reason for this is the strength and utility that Heavy brings to fights that are beneficial in close range. Before we get into some weapon values, I want to first discuss the playstyles and meta of each weapon. When discussing the difference between lower and higher elo for Heavy, I feel like the views can be quite different, and I think that is for a very good reason. So let's break down the playstyles of Heavy based on gadgets and specializations. Charge and Slam, often good at complementing an aggressive playstyle or balancing out a further range playstyle with a good option where enemies are in your face, but can only be used when you are in close range to the enemies. It can also be used as a bit of mobility outside of fights as well. Goo Gun, the least used specialization, but in the right hands has some insane potential. Great for setting up defense, and can be an easy way to funnel players to where you want them to go. Can be used at all ranges, depending on what loadout you're going, but to fully utilize it, you do need to be close to the objective to set up good barriers, and to land goo blobs on enemies to slow them down. Mesh Shield, one of the most used and strongest specializations since day one, receiving multiple nerfs and still is on top. This specialization allows you to get right in the enemy's face while staying safe. You can also sit far back, but you don't really protect much. This is very beneficial when paired with a heal beam user, as you can protect your team and can be a proper frontline for your team. Basically, just use it and get right in people's faces. Winch Claw, this allows you to pull enemies right to your face to burst them down or to displace them from their setup with their own team. Fantastic utility that obviously is strong at a close range. For gadgets, we have Anti-Grav, great for mobility and displacement, combos well with other tools in the Heavy's arsenal, like Goo Gun and Winch, and is really good when used on the cash out. Barricade and Dome provide a great cover that can be placed down fast. These are very protective tools to keep you and your team alive in the heat of battle. C4, which is an amazing tool that allows you to play for drop on cash out. Motion Sensor is not the most commonly used gadget, but can be good at getting intel on the point or a specific choke point that you might expect players to go through. Pyro and Expo Mine can help set up defenses around specific choke points, and RPG, the tool that brings most of the hate towards this class in general. Fantastic for opening fights, destruction, finishing targets off, and even stalling the cash out steals when the C4 is not in play. With all this said, it's very clear that Heavies benefit the most from being in the front line, initiating for a team, and being the protector of the group. This is not the only way that you can play the class, but to make full use out of Heavy, you should be the tank for your team. So let's get into some weapons stats and values here. I'll leave a link below to the spreadsheet that I use for weapon values. It is the most accurate one that I have found and have been using for quite a while. So let's look at some weapon values here, and I'm going to break down some of the important values within this sheet. When looking at weapon TTK, it is very tricky to take these numbers at face value because something like the flamethrower can be inconsistent. The burn values don't reset until after the effect ends, meaning that you will have to reapply it. This makes the playstyle of the flamethrower just tricky to calculate a proper TTK value for, and realistically it is kind of irrelevant to this weapon. The main playstyle with the flamethrower is to combo it with the mesh, do a short burst, get the burn effect, and then wait for the burn to go through while holding your shield and then reapply the burn, effectively doing DPS while you are holding a shield. This playstyle, when done right, can be very oppressive, but as you can tell, the TTK values just do not accurately represent the strength of this weapon. Another note is that fire can remove gas, which is something good to know if the enemies are running a lot of gas. KS-23 has destruction capabilities, so it is able to open walls and ceilings. This utility can go a long way combo with stuff like the winch or goo. MGL has some destructive capabilities as well and is an AoE. So like the flamethrower, this weapon can actually do more damage than the value will state. But it also has fall off range with the explosion radius, so the MGL could suffer as well. One big negative is this does not combo well with the close range playstyle that Heavy typically plays, and when you get into a very close room, you could end up damaging yourself. So positioning with an MGL is much more of a selfish playstyle, akin to a light where they might not want to play on their team, but play off of their team. This doesn't provide that front line for your team, so it doesn't benefit as much from some of the class's utility, but in the right team comp can certainly be used well, often paired best with a second Heavy. SA-12 can also cancel the animation of the cycling the shotgun after 4 shots with various methods, the more common one being a quick melee, and being in shotgun range, this often makes the DPS actually higher than the potential TTK in most cases. Sledgehammer and Spear, both being melee, make them very hard to compare with other weapons. I will talk about them a little bit separately because they are tricky. At the moment, it's more about which is better and why. The Sledgehammer does bring destruction, again, very useful in the right hands. So on screen, we have some weapon values. I'm not going to go through every stat one by one, but I want to make some notes I find important. Reload values are very similar here. The KS-23 has a reload that's per slug, and depending on how many slugs are in your chamber, this can kind of take a bit longer or a bit shorter. The damage per magazine is very good with the SA-12 and the LMGs. Now let's take a quick look at the damage drop-off for the weapons and their range values. Some stuff like the melee feels more inconsistent with netcode depending on which attack, along with melee aim assist being pretty funky at times. I didn't want to make any claims there, but the spear certainly seems to be able to hit at a further distance. As you can see, in general, these weapons seem to be a little bit better used in close range. Now let's get to the time to kill values, the part everyone actually cares about, which admittedly is a very important aspect when looking at weapons. So on screen, we have the TTK values, and I want to make a few notes about these values as well. The flamethrower, as mentioned before, the value does not accurately calculate for the burn dot, as it can be inconsistent and tricky to calculate for, and it also doesn't have an accurate representation for its playstyle. You really shouldn't just be holding left click and walk towards people all the time. Utilizing the damage over time goes a long way to mastering this weapon. A KS-23, considering it takes a long time between shots, you can actually pull up your shield, take cover, or strafe during the shots, allowing you to play a little bit safer. It also has bullet travel and drop that you need to calculate for. Both LMGs have pretty bad values of DPS considering their recoil is also very tricky to control here. MGL can do AoE and does need to bounce once to explode after, so calculating for the delay and angle can be beneficial in some situations, but also bad in others. This is a very situational weapon and definitely a niche playstyle to say the least. SA-12-16 easily having some of the strongest values across the board here. More than doubling the kill speed versus all other options when killing lights, and the only thing to keep it under a second as the kill time when facing medium. Definitely a huge strength. This only requires 4 shots, and 4 shots is actually 312 damage total, so there is actually a little bit of room for error here to still get that 4-shot kill. And the 2 seconds on heavy calculates for the cycle animation, which we can cancel. Considering 4 shots does 312, we can actually quick melee for the 40 damage in order to kill a heavy in under 1 second with this combo. Obviously, these values require you to land your pellets and are in close range, but with how strong these values are, you can actually miss about half your shots and still reach similar time to kills. After the Lewis and the M60 nerf, we received the SA-12 becoming the new replacement for basically every player. The SA-12 has always been the top contender, but for a little bit we did have the Lewis and the M60, which were putting up a pretty good fight against this weapon. The Sledgehammer has some incredible kill combos and time to kills, but requires a lot of preparation and can't really do much at all outside of something being right in your face, whereas other weapons, even shotguns, can still pepper away at enemies, preventing natural health regen, or finishing off those targets that you just shot an RPG at. Definitely a strong pick right now when paired with Winch. Spear sadly has a very bad right click, making Sledge just the better melee right now. Which leads me to answering the question, what is the strongest weapon on heavy? It is, without a doubt in my mind, the SA-12-16. In the competitive scene of the game, the SA-12 is actually used by every single heavy player. The potential of this weapon is insane. It easily is the strongest weapon overall on the class and synergizes perfectly with how heavy plays, being the front line, the tank, and the person who should be in the enemy's faces, especially holding up the mesh shield. But even paired with the other specializations, it still combos really well with positioning. In lower elo and casual games, I'd actually say the Sledgehammer is probably the best, but only with Winch, as enemies can often be picked out with bad positioning, and with bad movement, they can easily be picks for the hammer. Using a Sledge also encourages good positioning with heavy, being the front line up in enemies' faces and not standing in the open to take any long range fights, which often is a waste of a heavy's time. Now, don't take this as you can't use any other weapons. If you want to master the MGL or become the best KS23 player out there, by all means, take the challenge. As I mentioned before, each weapon does have its own benefits and can create new situations that other weapons can't. I think it's important to use what is comfortable to you and spend the time to master it. I personally love using the bow, even though it's not good, but I still use the XP54 for stuff like pro scrims and tournaments where the competition is much harder and I need to bring the best tool for the job. Ultimately, this game is a sandbox, so enjoy playing it how you want to play. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'll be covering Season 4 info and making the guides for all the new stuff coming. Thank you to all my members. Comment below what weapon you think is the best for each class. I plan to cover light in the future. Be sure to get out there and blast your enemies away with your auto shotty, and I will see you in the finals.